Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to Doku Baku 2020. This is our fourth year of the festival, and I'm welcoming you at the industry session with the director Greta Stocklassa, whose film we are screening in the international competition, the film Kiruna. This is Greta's debut film, is her first feature-length film, and welcome, Greta. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Maybe before we get to the film and her approach, I wanted to ask you, Greta, what brought you to documentary film, and why documentary? Why not fiction? Or how are you perceiving this division of documentary and fiction yourself?
I think I started with photographing. When I was 14, I loved to photograph, and genuinely I was walking around the city and I like to take pictures of things. So I got interested in observing the reality and seeing details people don't see, or see things we are used to see in a different perspective. And then I grew closer to the medium of film because it's so complex and you have everything, and it's not just visual, but you have the sound and how to build the story, a lot of aspects. And as a director, you have to be very multi-talented, or do a lot of things, and be very bossy, which I can be. So I think it was a good match. And then I think for me, documentary film and fiction film are not two separate things, really. As you could see in the film too, I think there is a very fluid line or difference or border between documentary film and fiction. And I like to experiment with both what we call documentary and fiction. But in documentary, the biggest strength of documentary is, of course, it's reflecting real people and real experiences. And I think that this authenticity you have is something I don't even think there is or I don't know myself any like reasonable, pragmatic way of describing it, but I think it's just a big plus of a thing that's undescribable. And I think that's even what people usually like in fiction, if it seems like it's real. And if the story is based on a true story, for instance, then I think people get even more interested. So the value of not truth, because I could be discussed, but the authenticity is something that's very important.
Thank you. And also thank you for mentioning the words, or using the words authenticity and reflection, because I think there is pretty common trap in saying that documentary is the truth, while you have used the word reflection and authenticity. But so how is your take on the truth in a documentary film, or truth in depicting reality? What do you see as truth?
Well, yeah, I think there's a common misconception that documentary films should be objective, that you see the truth, that you see reality, which is, it's not, it's a lie, or it's a very easy, if you think about it, it's not possible to make an objective film, because just by choosing your topic, by choosing the scenes you will show, by choosing protagonists, by compressing the time, you're actually making big like steps to doing it the way you see. So it's always a reflection of how the author, the director, or the DOP even sees reality, which is interesting. And now I realized that I was with Kiruna. This is the first time I thought of it, but I was doing it through my perspective. But then the DOP, the cameraman, Standa, he was filming it. So he actually made his what I thought was only my perspective of the thing, he actually just when he decided to I don't know, to change the perspective or to actually stop the filming, he actually made a lot of I didn't think of that, but he affected what I like my perspective there with his perspective. Yeah.
Right, and it's also you talked about the bossiness of director, and you talked about the roles that the director has to have. How was your communication with Standa? I have to say the cinematic language and the cinematography framing is spectacular. So how did you develop it together, or was it you coming with clear idea of the cadrage and the framing?
We were working very closely, and we decided pretty early on that we wanted to do the topic as an observational film. But it was we understood it was very difficult because we weren't able to go there very often. So, because when you do observation, you either need to invest a lot in like recreating things, or you need to invest or like this, you need to invest a lot of time, either the way that you are there before and you observe a lot and you find and you try to find what are the scenes I would like to film, and then you film them, which takes a lot of years of research, for instance, the way I chose it. Or the other way is you film everything and then you invest a lot of time in the editing room, which I didn't want to do. But so it was a tricky thing, but we decided we wanted to, since it's a very visual place, and the atmosphere was something that I thought was important to get into the film. We chose that we wanted to have a very like clean visual approach. And I don't think it was only for its sake to have nice pictures. I thought it was important for exactly recreating the atmosphere of Kiruna, which is very strange to me. So, and I think we kind of managed to do that because it's very slow. I don't know, maybe a lot of you guys thought it was slow, but I think it's how we also perceived Kiruna as a place, because you have this big hole underneath yourself, and there's like always danger lurking underground, but nothing's happening on surface. It goes very slowly, and you don't know much about it until in the middle of the night when the explosions go off. So we were trying to recreate that. We were trying to find shots that would show that there is this big mine underneath the city. So we were looking for the cracks and things. And then I think one thing that a lot of people have said is a plus of the film now was that even if it's like the shots are very, very long and the camera is still, which we decided we shot everything from a tripod, which I actually regret a little bit, because I think Standa too, or when we see the film now, we were thinking about all the things that it would have been more alive in a way, and it would have been much easier for him, especially because he would have been more able to react on the situations if you have a handheld camera than if you have a tripod and you're still trying to make very clean shots. So that's something that we developed after time, but we don't really regret not making it that way, but just that it would probably have been much easier.
And for me as a spectator, it was a element of like good comforting, or how to say, like an element of what I felt from the audience, or from the people, inhabitants of Kiruna, that they are dealing with it. They are very kind of, they are not doing revolution, there are not big demonstrations, and it's kind of like, okay, this is how it is, and we are going to deal with the situation. And I felt that this film language that is very much like planned and that is very much steady ahead, was reflecting on the mood in among the people. So maybe to this follows my next question: how did the genealogy, or like, what is the genealogy of the film? Like, when did you start, and what was initially your idea at the beginning? Like, did it change during the course of filming when you started, and what we see now on the screen?
Yes, it has developed a lot from when my first my first idea was that I was interested in the moving of the city, of course, because when you say, "Oh, they're gonna move a city," it's weird because cities shouldn't be moving. It's always strange to see things that are not supposed to move. So when you see houses on trucks, you get a strange feeling. And I was I thought I was fascinated by that, and that it was happening in Sweden, which is one of my home countries, and it's also something. Usually, usually you have heard about movements of cities in post-Soviet countries or during the communism era, where it wasn't even a question if they're going to do that. They were pretty hard with demolishing beautiful old cities. And Czech Republic, where I live, is an example of that. There've been several. So I was curious that this was happening in Sweden, which to me is one of the most progressive countries in the world, where they are very humanistic and solidaric and always talking about these beautiful things about humankind. But then they do something like this. So I was interested about the movement, but then the more I went to Kiruna, I realized that for the first, the movement's going to take a lot of time, so I would have to film it for 30 years. But also that it started to crystallize that there were different topics that I found interesting, and that the moving became more of a metaphor for what was happening with the lives of the people. So I decided to get to know the place better. And I went there I started going to Kiruna a couple of times for 2 weeks, and to get to know people and to find the right perspective and approach. And then then I went there and I lived there for 1 month and a half. So I hired a room or rented a room with a family, and I started to go to the library and to get to know Timo, one of the protagonists, and he took me to the school he was teaching in. And then suddenly I started to understand that, okay, this is a city where not only is it moving, but there is this history of iron mining, which means there are a lot of men in the city. A lot of young men come here, and all the young girls who want to move to bigger cities, so they have trouble finding wives. So they go to Thailand because they have a lot of money and they find a wife there. So there was a small Thai community, which was also something I was considering to have in the film. Mm-hmm. There is this hockey team that is also fighting this macho culture of tough guys, miners. So they wanted to be more inclusive, and they started playing in rainbow shirts with rainbow stripes, mm-hmm. which for hockey, which is such a tough sport, is very unusual. And then there is this ice hotel, which is a very posh and very expensive thing you can do. It costs about 1,000 euros a night, and it's a hotel completely built of ice, which melts every year, and and they have to rebuild it, which is also a symbol for what's happening to the city. It has always have to. So all these things. Now I'm mentioning the things that are not in the film. Mm-hmm. So of course you can imagine there were a lot of interesting things. So I had to find the focus, and I think the one that I found most interesting was the one with finding that the city is trying to find its place, and Kiruna is a city where the people are also trying to find their place. It's always the the demography of the city is changing a lot. So when I started going there, it was during the biggest refugee crisis. So a lot of refugees who came to Sweden, they come to the southern part, but because of the quotas, they were sent to Kiruna. So you can imagine how. So there were in the small city. Suddenly there were 1,000 in a city with 15,000 people. There were 1,000 immigrants. So that was interesting to me, how it was for people who are coming from the Middle East. That's with a lot of conflicts. How they're perceiving Kiruna, a city where people are voluntarily demolishing their houses. So that was a perspective I decided quite early on I wanted to film, and then I got to know Abdel Rahman when I started going to a volunteering it was called the Language Cafe, where Swedish people were meeting refugees and helping, or just meeting for coffee, but they could help them with their Swedish homework, or just by talking Swedish to learn them the language. And I got to know Abdel Rahman and his friends there. So, and then another perspective that I found that I haven't lived in this part of Sweden, that was pretty new to me. I have heard about it or read about it in history books, was the history of the Sami people, because this part of Sweden is called Sapmi or Laponia, which is it's not very nice, but more Sapmi. It's a northern part of Norway, Sweden, and Finland, where the indigenous people, or like people with indigenous heritage, live. This region they have even their own parliament now. So it's a very big part of Swedish culture and history, but not very often mentioned. And it's also a little dark history, which I think it's a like black dot on Swedish history, definitely, because they weren't treated, Sami people, very well. They were, especially during the Second World War, but even after, it was until the 70s, they were very tough. You weren't allowed, or during the 50s, you weren't allowed to speak Sami, which is one of the worst things if you take the people's language, because as a result for generations. And they were not allowed to study on universities. They were not allowed to work in. They were supposed to be Sami and take care of reindeer. But now that, of course, the situation is better. They got the status of indigenous people, and they have the privilege of owning reindeer. All of these things I didn't know much about, so I started to. I met a lot of Sami people, especially girls. I was interested in, because it's also a culture that is also a little, that it's not very equal still, but they're especially getting. So I was interested in how girls perceive it, and how the situation is now, because of course still now there are Sami families who think that this part of Sweden was colonized, that there was basically colonization. So suddenly there was a perspective, even on this moving of the city, it was not how it's supposed to move or where it's supposed to move. It was more, the city shouldn't even be here. You took our land. And now even the mines they have a terrible impact on environment, of course, which is very important. Sami people, a lot of Sami people are very like loud eco activists, because they need it for the reindeer, for the reindeers which are who are moving across Sweden, and they need the forests. They need their special ways of walking, because they have that instinct. They need to go there to find, and if they can't go there, if they don't find any food, they will die. So it's easy as that. So I understood that there was this perspective of new people coming to Kiruna, but there of course had to be the perspective of the people who were there even before Kiruna was there. So it suddenly became like this complex portrait of, well, it wasn't about a moving of a city anymore, but it was more a reflection of the important questions I see in society. So yeah, the clash between the new and the old, and to where we belong and stuff. So that was a very long answer to that question, but that's the genealogy.
Perfect answer for letting us be in your mind how it was developing. And to me, there was reoccurring topic of home. And when I'm thinking about Sami people and belonging and what is home, now you have mentioned a few times like city trying to find its place, Abdul being asylum seeker. And then yourself also, you are coming from bilingual family. You have 2 homes. So how was this home searching playing a role in the development and in the film? Were you casting for Sami people and for refugees, or how did it come? And how does this influence choice of your topics?
I think it definitely. The fact that I grew up in 2 countries definitely influenced my choosing of the topic, because I think that that maybe that was why I was looking for this, or that I saw this saw these parallels between refugees and the Sami people, and even the ordinary inhabitants. I can imagine someone who lives in Kiruna would do a completely different film about this. So that there was also a pro and con with that. I'm not from that place. I don't like the approach that you should only be filming about things you self experience. I don't think that's right. I think it's important to be respectful if you're portraying something that's a little foreign to you, but I think you show that respect by actually observing a lot, and by talking to a lot of people, by trying to understand what they would like to say, but you still need to do your film and your perspective. So I think there was a plus with me actually being someone coming from the outside who could see these parallels between that it's a Sapmi and but at the same time there are people fleeing from wars coming there, and they for them moving a house is like, yeah, whatever, why? I've just fled like 10,000 kilometers, so I left my home there. So I thought that this perspective was it gave something. That's why the film looks like it is. And then of course me being between 2 countries and trying to find out what is home, because if you have your one part of the family in one country and the one in the other, and then you have to move, and then you start to thinking about what is the home, and what is nationality, because for me it's been fluid. Like there's no one. I'm not Czech or Swedish. Like I'm European. I don't really care. Of course, it's easier to have a Swedish passport because then you don't for certain reasons. But so the thinking of identity and I think it's a very still important topic with like especially in Europe, but in Azerbaijan, of course. Like with lands, like people trying to separate, lands trying to close, like European Union is falling apart slowly. People that like this, who are we? Why are we proud of the things we are proud of? What do we want to be? Like what identity do I need to put the label of being Czech on myself? So these things, this is like very far. I understand you maybe don't see these things in the film, but they were definitely in the back of my head when I was doing it.
I totally saw the question of identity, and I was myself pretty surprised by how peacefully people are dealing with the transition, how peacefully they were agreeing to move. And I was wondering how, because for many of us, or at least for me, although I have been moving around a bit, still part of my identity is the values that I have, the home that I build. Although the home might be on the road, it is settled, or it's puzzled from pieces of how I grew up, who my parents are, what are my friends, or who are my friends. And I was surprised myself how little people were opposing to this movement, and also how little of conflict I saw. The biggest conflict for me was when the people at the Sami Parliament, they were mentioning Rose Parks and her action and her revolt, and there I felt the clash, and there I felt what they are campaigning for. But I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit on the conflict, and I think it draws on the identity question that you were mentioning, and conflict in the film also, as often we are told, filmmakers, we need to have a conflict in the film in order to keep the film going. So what was the approach for you?
Well, that's funny, because that was something I was a little traumatized from my school, when one of my teachers said to me, like, I shouldn't be filming this because it's just like filming weather. There is no conflict. And I was like, I guess first I got demotivated, like, well, yeah, and then I understood. Yeah, well, I understand, and then I thought he was right. And then, but then I thought, but why do I still find it interesting? And then I realized that that's just because everyone sees conflict as something else. Like, we have a completely different way of thinking about film, for instance. So I understand he doesn't see the conflict, but for me there is a conflict, but it's more in the nuances, and it's more subtle. It's not, okay, you don't have a clash between neo-Nazis and Antifa, but you have this between, like, different ways of seeing the world, between Timo, who is the teacher and is trying to make people see like the immaterial values of world, and trying to make people actually be active, but there is no visible conflict, but the conflict of him trying to make people think a different way, maybe not even succeeding, but maybe he understands that maybe he's been, like, maybe it's his time to realize that the world is changing, and that he can't do much about it, that he just has to have the hope in the next generation who will live in the Kiruna, for instance. So, and those are, like, very subtle, but I agree, it's the key. You need to have a conflict. You can't just go somewhere and, like, just show this is happening somewhere. That's then you could do journalism, like, if you just want to show interesting things, but there has to be something surprising, or that's more of the conflict. Like, it's not enough to just state this is happening. You have to be there more and show, like, why is it important for us to see this? And to me, it's also more about that there has to be an underlying, there needs to be more, there needs to be another theme than the one that you see. So with Kiruna, you have, okay, a city that's moving. This is for 99% of the people, this is a film about the moving of a city. But for 1%, hopefully, they will see the things I do, at least. That there is, that's just the surface, that's just the frame for the film, but the topic is underneath, and I think it's important that it is universal. I know there are people, I can see the quality of making films about, like, investigation, or activist films, or about a certain political like topic, because they have their place, because they can maybe change, actually they can change the reality. But I don't really, that's probably not right now, at least, that's not really how I want to work. I like to see I like to use the medium of film in a different way, and having a more universal topic to the films.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the word surprise. It's actually something I also like when making movies, that I'm always surprised, and then I need to reinvent myself. And so I was wondering, what was it for you, the surprise on the go? Like, what were you surprised in Kiruna with?
The first surprise was that when I went there with the prejudice, basically, that okay, you have this mean mine, like this big corporate who's like destroying people's homes just to get money, and people will be revolting and they will be protesting and stuff. And then I come there and I know, no, they're just sitting at home like, yeah, well, it's going to be nice to move. I'm going to get a bigger house and a bigger garage and nicer kitchen. I was like, what? So that was the lack of the visible, explicit conflict was something that I was surprised by. And that's what maybe I wanted to do. Then the surprise was that this is not a film about a classic film about a mining topic or like environmental topic. This is a different kind of film, which it has these aspects, but it's a different. So that was a big surprise for me. But to what I understood, how I understood it, why there was no protests or conflicts, was that for first, Swedish people are not very, they don't go into conflicts very often. I don't like doing generalizations, but this one I'm pretty sure of. Like they're very diplomatic usually, and people are very trying to like, you shouldn't be really standing out. You shouldn't be like, I don't know, there are not very often demonstrations as like here in Prague all the time, and then in Sweden I don't remember, like, yeah, not very often. And it's not like very conflicty, but that's fine. Of course there's still people who like to protest, but then the thing with Kiruna is that it's not like in other mining towns where the town was there, has this historical value, and the mining company comes and just destroys it for gain. This was the city was built in the end of 19th century, just because they find iron ore. So the city was built because of the mine. So now there is this strange symbiosis between that. The people, the city needs the mine because it knows it wouldn't be there otherwise, and everyone works there, or like a lot of people work there, and everything is connected to the mine. It's in the core identity of the city, and the mine needs the city because they need workers. So there's this strange symbiosis, and since it's a very young city still, and people have always lived with this, that they're there for the iron mine. I think the man who was buying the houses from people that I met that I really wanted to film, but he, of course, because he worked for the mining company, I don't think he would have been. He didn't want to. He said, "Yeah, we have it in our DNA that we have to move. Like we are born with that. We're going to have to move someday." Mm-hmm. So they don't. That's why they don't protest and stuff.
And this leads me to another question about, you just mentioned the man who you were considering for filming, and the ice hotel and different things that had impact on you and how you saw the place. So how was the difficult process in the editing room, or chopping the things away? Could you share a bit about when you made those choices, how you made them, and how did it crystallize into these three main characters, or these lines that you were following in the end?
Well, I don't really, we were editing while we were filming. We started to edit because I needed to show some part of it in school and stuff. So I got to know the material pretty often, and the first version I made for school looked pretty different. I had different characters too, then they or there were more characters that later weren't there, because we couldn't film with them anymore. One got ill, and the other one we understood wasn't. It was a like dead end for the film. So that was easier, that we decided we don't want to have these characters anymore, or it wouldn't lead the story anywhere. Like they could be there for one chapter, but then there would be a different kind of film. And I think I don't really remember like exact things when we decided to drop them, but I know the one thing is that you definitely need to have an editor when you do a film. I know a lot of documentary filmmakers like to do stuff themselves, and me too. And I like editing. So I was always in the editing room, because I also needed to translate very often, but because we were editing with a Czech editor, Hanka. But also because you need that perspective. And I think Hanka showed me a lot of times, like I was telling, this is my favorite scene, this is happening. And then she watched it and she was like, I don't see these things in that. Because I had the experience from the set where I experienced this was amazing, but it just wasn't in the material because, I don't know, we filmed it the wrong way, or because just out of the context, it didn't work the same. So it was important. And then, like we had the ice hotel as a metaphor, and there was also, because there's another thing they're shooting space rockets. There's a space base close to Kiruna, like the Swedish space force, no, Swedish space
base maybe, yeah,
space program. They are it's a big area, and they're shooting rockets into space with experiments, which I thought was also very interesting, because then you have the parallel between the mind that goes into the ground and the space, the humankind expanding into space. But it was difficult to film there, and we had like different shots, but it wasn't working, so we needed to drop that too. So some decisions came quite organically, and some were more painful. Like the ice hotel, we thought we would use visually and have like intermezzos between different chapters, but since we have 3 characters, and we were thinking about if we didn't want to split it into chapters, each character, but intervene it, we had to listen to how the whole is, or watch the whole if it's working. There are amazing scenes with all of the separate ones that we had to lose just because it wasn't working in the whole. It was slowing it down too much. And now when I see the film, like I feel I would like, there's still work on editing. Like now with I don't know, it's 1.5 years since it premiered. So so I think it's like I could do 10 minutes shorter, perhaps.
I think this is, I wonder if this is sickness of a filmmaker, that you are never done. You need a deadline, because there is always something to do better and re-edit and do a color grading a bit more and chop few frames. And I think this is something we are doomed with, probably.
But I hate to do that. I never re-edit. And even now, like there are some things that I know would have been very easy, and I don't know, even with the subtitles that are a little wrong, like no, I don't want to reopen it. It's closed. Now it's like, okay, you've learned from this, and now you take your lesson to the next project.
But you mentioned now something, you mentioned the space base and or space program, and our imagination of space and inhabiting a space is like inhabiting new world, and having this like clear paper, or like new start. And your film is called Kiruna, Brand New World. So this imagination of how things can be better in the future are closely linked for me. So do you feel that people are looking forward to the new start also from the point of view to reset the society in the new place, or like are they challenging themselves, or was this on your mind also when you were shooting and then editing?
Sorry, now you broke up a little bit. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, it was a question about the brand new world.
Yeah. Just the end of it. What did people?
How much was this new start on your mind, and did you want people, the audience, to wonder about this new world? How would we want a new world to be? What would be the new world if we have this clear table and we can just start anew?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was definitely something I was thinking about, because they, especially with how they were building the new city and how they were talking about it, and like the propaganda around it, like you could see when they were singing in the new city hall, which is like ridiculously big and round with a golden crown in the middle of an industrial area. It's like a little ridiculous. So yeah, I was thinking about it. I wanted to have that more in the film, like when we were talking with the protagonists. We were filming with a family that was the man was working in the mine, and they were one of the last. They had to move. They were one of the last inhabitants of the houses that got torn down when we were filming. And we wanted to film the move and how they're going into their new house and how they're choosing what we want to take with us to the new house. What do we want to lose? Like, this is a new start. But that's where the father in the family got ill and we couldn't film with them anymore. So I was thinking about that. But the Kiruna Brand New World, to me, it was more why I decided to have that like second title was it's more connected to the novel by Aldous Huxley, the dystopian novel, which is because to me the concept of Kiruna is a little dystopian or It's utopian, but with a to me very cold, like almost dystopian feels. And why also this one, because I like that book. And I think it's also more accurate for this time than perhaps 1984. That was very like accurate for the next 40 years that came with like totalitarian regimes all around the world growing. But this book is more about, there is no like this totalitarian people like saying to people what they should do and not do. There's more like this hedonistic world of like feeling people are driven not by fear but by pleasure. Mm-hmm. They want to feel good, which is like also more like that's how today's society is working. They're like they're not. It's not like they're not allowed to read certain books. They don't read certain books anymore. They just don't, because they're driven by completely different things. And I could see that in Kiruna too. Like they were driven by having nicer cars and nicer kitchens and nicer like material lives and earning a lot of money in the mine and going on vacations to like foreign countries, to warm countries. And they were living in this like very cold, dark place, but they found the meaning of life in these like very small material things. And I thought that was interesting and like concentrated in a way for me, because I feel that's happening in everywhere. But now you could see it more clearly because it was it was somehow concentrated.
Thank you so much. And that maybe brings me to the last question. Like, how are you doing in these times when we are actually cut out of those pleasures that we hedonistically enjoy? And how is the life under Corona for a documentary filmmaker? How is it for you?
Well, it's not ideal.
Can you work? Are you doing something now, or what?
Well, I'm a little worried about money mostly because a lot of work gets cancelled. But that's also very like material way of thinking of me. But I think I don't know. It's been very interesting. The quarantine has been very interesting to me personally, of realizing certain things and how I actually want to live. That I think it's very easy to get when you're in school and you're comparing yourself with people or with your friends, which is even worse. Or you see that people are very ambitious and they do a lot of things and they work and they don't sleep almost and they have time for partying too. And so now, like, I realized I more realized my capacity, and I realized that's okay. That's okay. You need to sleep more, and that's okay. You can only work for 4 to 6 hours a day, because then you're more productive, because you have the rest later and stuff. So I realized this is okay. But then also one thing I like about the quarantine is it like wiped out FOMO, like fear of missing out, because no one can do anything. So that's a great plus. And for the filmmaking, I think it's now we're going to have a horrible era where people will be doing just a lot of documentaries about coronavirus and about lockdowns. So that's like, if I can give anyone any tip, please don't make any film about this anymore, because it's already boring and they're not even done yet. But more, I think it's going to be interesting how we're going to the narration of films. We're going to have it as something like a lot of films will be filmed now. I have a project that I'm working on, which is we are doing an interview with a very old man, and we can't film with him anymore because we don't want to put him on a risk. So we are thinking about creative ways of how to film it through Skype, of course. How he could actually manage to do the lighting or something, like be creative in these ways. So I can imagine there will be a lot of creative films. There will be a lot of Skype films and Zoom films. But so that's definitely going to change the narration of films. And I think that the difficult thing is also, if you have a topic now, that it doesn't have to do anything with coronavirus, but of course is affected by it, because how can you continue filming and reflect that it's a pandemic going on, but it's still not the topic, like not to make it too big attention to it. So it's a very interesting time, but I think we're going to learn how to tell like this. The people. I think we start like using different shortcuts. Like, okay, we understand immediately that if someone is wearing a face mask, it's because it's filmed during Corona. Maybe we don't have to explain it anymore soon, because everyone will know. Like, I remember when I first saw people, like politicians on TV wearing face masks, or like the reporters in studios having face masks, which I always thought was a little ridiculous. Like, why? Like, he's not going to infect the TV viewers, like, and the crew is probably far away. Like, that's not that important. I thought it was ridiculous. And now I don't even think about it. Now I see them with face mask. It's like, yeah, of course he's wearing a face mask.
Part of the day.
Yeah. So yeah, it's tough, but like, don't. There've been always tough times for filmmakers. So I don't think this is any much different.
So keep going, all of us.
Yes, and. Yeah, I was thinking I came to think more about the conflict and the purpose of documentary film, and the being objective and authenticity. And I think that's definitely I just wanted to say that again. I think that's the biggest virtue of a documentary film, that you can actually make change, not maybe even if it's not literal in political regimes or so, but in the way people are thinking and if it's at least 1 or 2 people, then I think it's worth it somehow.
That's great. Thank you for it's an inspiring final line.
Yeah, I was preparing it.
Thank you, Greta, for inspiring talk and sharing a piece of your mind and how you were thinking about the film.
Thank you too. It was very nice talking to you too, and it would have been even nicer if we could have been in Baku together. But even this was nice.
Hope one day you come to Baku for a Doku Baku or to film something. And thank you for everybody to watch this masterclass. You can watch Greta's film, Kiruna, The Brand New World on Doc Alliance, our partner of Doku Baku 2020. And yeah, have a good day. Thank you.